Hello, and welcome to another Velcro City Records tutorial. I'm your host, Daniel, and today's tutorial is going to be on 5 mixing tips for dance music. Okay, let's get into it. The first one we're going to learn is creating buses. So what I've done is I've gone to my mixer window here, and I've selected all the synths. Let me just get this one up. That's better. So here are all my synths, crudely named, but we can do that at a later date. I just selected them all, and then I'm going to go here and say add group to selective channels. Then it asks me to name it. I'm going to say synth bus or synth group, doesn't matter. And there we go. Now we can go to the effects and do the same thing. And then what we can do is we can just go to group tracks here. And as you can see, I've got my drum bus, my synth bus, and my effects bus. And this is much easier because what we can do here is we can actually add effects to the whole bus. We can EQ the whole bus, the bus as a whole. Or we can indeed actually just mix the track like this. The second one we're going to learn about is reverb sends. What are reverb sends? Well, sends is a way to add an effect onto a channel, but kind of have volume control over the effect. And I'll show you what I mean. I'm just going to play the track for a little bit, and we'll go back to it. So as you can hear, there's quite a lot of reverb on the synths. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our mix window. We're going to highlight the synths. And what we're going to do is we're going to take all the reverb off the channels and add it on a send. So what we're going to do is add effects channel to synth bus. We're going to choose reverb. This one. We'll set the time for about 3 seconds, no pre-delay. Diffusion can be on 50. Roll off the low end and then put a bit of a high pass filter on it. And we'll put the mix level to 100. I'll tell you why we'll do that in a second. And now we've added reverb to every single channel on our synths. We've got this little send effect here. Here it is, so you can see it easier. We can adjust the level of reverb we want to give. Okay, so the third mixing tip we're going to learn is how to create a sidechain bus. Now, we've already talked about buses before, but this time we're going to talk about how to create a sidechain bus so that you have one bus where all your channels are routed to, just for sidechain purposes. Now, we talked about groups and buses before. And what I've done is I've taken all my synths here and I've bussed them out, all the ones that I wanted to send to a sidechain. I've sent them first to their own bus called leads over here, and then I've routed that bus to an effects bus called sidechain here, and then I've put a volume shaper on that bus. It might sound complicated, but I'll tell you why that I did that. With this, it means I have control over the individual instruments and really decide which ones I want to sidechain and which I don't want to sidechain. Having one sidechain channel instead of multiple sidechain channels really helps. And the reason this is because it will make your music sound more concise, instead of having lots of different sidechain plugins open at the same time. You're also going to save on CPU power, so it's actually a really good tip. The fourth effect we're going to talk about is less compression on individual channels. Now, what does that mean? It means that by adding less compression to your individual channels, you're not peaking into your master output. And especially with dance music, when you get to your final master, it's not over compressed. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. Here's an older project that I've done. Again, it's kind of unreleased, unfinished project. But it's going to give you a good idea of what I mean by less compression on channels. So what's going to happen is, especially with dance music, you're going to want the track to be as loud as possible. But you also want to add mastering plugins, compression mainly, on your master output. So what's going to happen is, if you think about the compression chain, if you're compressing on your individual channels, then you're compressing on your master, and then you bounce down to an MP3, which what it does is it compresses the file again. That's like 3 stages of compression. And then if you're sending it to somebody over the internet, it's going to compress it even more. So this is just trying to limit the amount of compression that you add. So that kind of, you're trying not to compress as much on individual channels, and instead you're just compressing on your master, compressing on a few channels, and then I think you'll realize that your mix will sound a lot fatter and bigger. Here's a track that I made. I'm just going to show you a bit of it and then show you how much compression is actually on it. Now, as you can see, the drums sound quite big in this track. And how I got them to sound that big is with compression. But as you can see on my inserts, there's no compression on the individual channels, except for the bongos, but that doesn't really count. So this main beat here, made up of kick, a clap, hi-hat, shaker, and then 2 extra claps, have no compression on it. The kick itself has nothing on it. And the reason I'm doing that is because if you see over here, I've routed it to a drum bus. If we go to that drum bus channel, there's a compressor on it. If I take the compression off and you hear what it sounds like, it's going to make a huge difference. Should have heard a massive difference there, because what's happening is when you compress a bus as a whole, it kind of glues the elements together rather than compressing each individual channel, which can actually make them stick out even more. This is just an easy way of how to reduce the amount of compression that you're adding on individual channels. We take the leads, for example, you'll see, again, no compression. Here I have used compression on one of the channels, and that's just to give it a little more oomph. And it's okay to add it on a few individual channels, But just make sure that you're not compressing every single channel. And that if you do have things that are going to the bus, best to compress the bus as a whole instead of each individual channel. When we get to our master channel, you'll see that I've added a maximizer plugin, but then nothing else. The reason, you can add as much compression as you want, but remember, compression actually ruins the quality of the audio, and the more compression you add, the lower the quality of the audio. So just be careful about that. Okay, so the final mixing tip is using stereo enhancers. Now, if you don't know what that is, it's a very short delay that you can use to enhance the width of your track. Now, a lot of mastering engineers actually put this on the master output of your song, which is great, but it can lead to quite a lot of problems, mainly phase issues, and as well as losing a lot of the bass element in your track. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to add stereo enhancers to your tracks. Now if you listen, the bass and the drums are right bang in the center. Other elements such as these synths are again in the center. But how I get that width is by using stereo enhancers on my pads. You hear how dramatic that is of a difference. Now what I'm doing is I'm only using stereo enhancers on my pads. And the reason is because you don't really want them in the center. You want them to sound as wide as possible, so that you're kind of filling them out and leaving room for the kick and for the drums and the bass. So what I've done is I've used stereo enhancers. I can show you. And I've put the width at a really high amount, and the reason is because I'm pushing these to the extremities of the left and the right, so that it's not going to conflict with any of the other synths and actually any of the other tracks, and just make the sound overall much bigger. I'll just solo all the synths for you, and then you can see how they kind of thicken out the sound. Now you can kind of start to hear, if you're listening on headphones or speakers, you can kind of start to hear that the pads are now getting in the way of the other synths. So I'm going to add the stereo enhancers and see if you hear a difference. Now what you should have heard is a dramatic difference. As I add the stereo enhancers, it's actually making the synth sound a lot wider, allowing for the main leads to come through a lot more punchier. And that's it, really. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. If you have, be sure to click the thumbs up button and subscribe for more Velcro City tutorials.